I love this. I didn't even have to say anything. Bravo, bravo. Good evening. How are we doing tonight? All right. I like this level of enthusiasm. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Yvonne English. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation here at Grove City College. And we have the pleasure of bringing speakers to campus through the Richard G. Staley 62 Visionary Entrepreneur Speaker Series. Those of you who know me know I get very excited about our guests who come to campus, but what I will say is I'm especially excited when alums come back to share with you, because you can see people who have been right in your seats, and you get to follow their journey and hear what they've done. And a lot of students think that's very inspirational. These two individuals are very special individuals. I have not vetted what they're saying, but what I can tell you before vetting and just by knowing them, that this is going to be both inspirational and informative, and you're going to want to get out there and make the world a better place. And anyone who can inspire you to do that is good in my books. So let's get started. Lisa DeFalco is a senior entrepreneurship major, and I'm going to ask her to come up to the stage and tell you a little bit about the speakers today.
Hello, I am Lisa DeFalco, and I am honored to introduce our two speakers for the evening. We do have the unique opportunity tonight to hear from two perspectives, an initial investor and a key player in a startup. So Sean Ammirati is a 2002 graduate of Grove City College, where he majored in computer information systems. He spent 13 years founding, building, and selling businesses in the media and software industries, one being MSpoke, which was the first acquisition of LinkedIn, where Sean served as co-founder and COO. Sean joined Birchmere Ventures in 2012 and is currently an adjunct professor of entrepreneurship at Carnegie Mellon University's Tepper School of Business and Heinz College. He was also a founding advisor to InnovationWorks Alpha Lab Accelerator. And most recently, Sean completed his first book, The Science of Growth, published by St. Martin's Press in April 2016. He also asked me to mention that, like me, is a member of the Evan Addams fan club. We are mutual members. Leading into our next introduction, Evan Addams graduated from Grove City College in 2010. He's the National Partnerships Lead for Nowait, acquired by Yelp earlier this year. You should Google it. It's really cool. As an original team member at Nowait, Evan's impact was creating and scaling each function of the client-facing organization. So inside sales, customer success, national sales, and strategic account management. His role at Nowait plays into his passion to implement capital, money, time, experience, and networking in order to create a healthy economy, ultimately leading to community flourishing. Evan is an active real estate investor and startup sales coach. In his time on campus, Evan was involved in the Okie Fraternity Homecoming Committee, like myself, and Crimson and White Men's Lacrosse and the Entrepreneurship Club. He and his wife, Bethany, just welcomed their first son, Everett. And Evan is I got to sit down and talk with him. He's a very visionary speaker, so get pumped. Put on your socks, prepare to have them knocked off, because it's going to be a great evening. Please join me in welcoming Sean and Evan to the stage and back to campus.
Wow. I didn't know you were in the club, Sean.
I am. No, I'm really excited to be in the club.
Yeah, congratulations.
So what's weird is usually that's the only part of the introduction. We usually just stop at the Evan Addams fan club. So.
Yeah. Thank you for having us, everybody. I'll kick us off. We're going to talk. Sorry, I'm not scratching my back. I am rearranging my mic so I can kind of sit and look casual, like that cool preacher at like a big church or something. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So Sean, Sean has been a great friend and leader for me. We're going to talk about that dynamic, the two perspectives, as Lisa introduced. He used a phrase with me over coffee, and he didn't just make it up for me. It was sort of
mostly for you.
Wow.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow. And his phrase was, great entrepreneurs, create the world how it ought to be. And the first time he said that to me, it struck me. There's a lot of ways to look at entrepreneurship. When I was in college, an entrepreneurship major was that small business, family business. Could a family business that didn't scale, if I wasn't Facebook, is that entrepreneurship? What's that mean? And I learned a lot about maybe the economics of what an entrepreneur is at Grove City. And when he said that phrase, it pulled things together for me, and it was thematic in his book. And so we're going to talk about the Nowait story, but we want to talk about it through that lens of what does it mean to create the world how it ought to be, and all the things wrapped up in that phrase, how arrogant it is, and how that's essential to be a great entrepreneur. That's kind of the context overall, and through that we'll share each of our experiences, kind of a little bit more context on our bio, but that Nowait story of, I think was it phrased, how Nowait sold for 40 million. So, because he's the author of that phrase, I wanted Sean to kind of create some preface and context around that.
Yeah, so like I think if you just do this thought experiment with me. Imagine that you fell asleep for 25 years and woke up today. And when you woke up, I think you would find the world to be just an absolutely magical place, right? We carry around computers in our pockets. Maybe you pick up a tablet instead of a newspaper, and you read that just 60 miles from here, people are building self-driving cars, and you think, wow, that's pretty cool. And then you walk out the door and you see somebody doing what you're pretty sure is a self-driving car, because from your perspective, everybody using the Uber app is getting a self-driving car, right? And I think, we could go on and on. Like the world would be pretty magical to you. But the point as it relates to entrepreneurship is every single thing that you would be reflecting on that made that world so magical was magical because an entrepreneur imagined it, or a team of entrepreneurs imagined it, and they made the world look that way, right? And then through that, right, whether it's Nowait or any company, through that they realize economic value by making that world magical. So not at all is this work just in the sense that you do it just to make the world great, but this is this great opportunity to both create the world as it ought to be and do it in a way where you're actually profiting in an asymmetric way from that, which I think we can get to later. But for me, it actually, the increasing interest in entrepreneurship is actually part of the reason that I remain optimistic about the future, right? So when I graduated from Grove City here, I went on to grad school at Carnegie Mellon, and let me tell you, when I told people I wanted to be an entrepreneur, they were pretty sure that meant that I couldn't get a real job. In fact, it's a couple of presidents ago now, but when I told Dr. Moore that I was going to be an entrepreneur, I'm pretty sure he thought I was crazy. In fact, I think he said that in a few more words, but only a few more words for those of you who remember Dr. Moore, that I was crazy. That's more for the faculty and the students.
But an older laugh.
That wasn't. Yeah, that was. But I think he did say. I think he said in just a few more that you're crazy. But the interesting thing now is like people pick schools based on how good their entrepreneurship programs are, right? And to me, this interest in more people pursuing this career of entrepreneurship is actually a reason for optimism. Now, I think a relevant question for a place like this institution is, okay, so if people are going to be making the world as it should be, we better make sure there are people with a worldview that we're comfortable with sitting and making that world as it ought to be, because if not, other people with very different worldviews are going to be making that world as it should be.
That was a crossroads for me as I was just out of school, and I had started a couple startup projects, and I'm mostly on the sales side. I was trying to sell things. I started to realize that, especially once you get out of, sorry to be cliche, but the Grove City bubble, not everybody thinks like you. And yes, within the Grove City bubble, you can still find your diversity of opinions, but it's once you get out into a city, there are a lot more opinions. And so I started to get worried, actually, of, well, what if I create something that culture eats up and they love it? Well, that caused me pause because I realized one of two things is happening. I created something that a culture who generally had a differing life opinion than me loved, and I got to figure out, well, did I feed them the stuff that I don't actually agree with, or did I create a product or service that shifted market intention that was actually more, you can say this at Grove City, God glorifying? And that doesn't just apply to social enterprise. I'm talking about for-profit business.
Yeah, so because it's supposed to be about Nowait. Let's talk about this in the context of Nowait, right? So, I can tell you from my perspective, every investment we make, and we had the privilege to get to be investors in Nowait, every investment we make, I ask myself the question, okay, how does this product or service make the world as it should be? Now, that doesn't mean that everyone who checks that box we invest in. There are plenty of people who I think, wow, that would make the world a great place, but it's not a great fit for Birchmere, or I don't believe they're the right entrepreneur. But the opposite is not true. If someone comes with an idea that I think could be incredibly lucrative, but not make the world as I believe it should be, then they should find a different investor to support that. So in the context of Nowait, I can say from my perspective, one thing that I believe to be just true in all areas of our lives, no matter what you believe, is that time is this incredibly valuable asset, right? Like once you spend time on one thing, you can't choose to spend it another way. So all of you guys have made a decision to at least spend 5 minutes with us. You don't get to get those 5 minutes back. You could choose to leave at this point, but those 5 minutes are spent. We hope that you don't, but that you could make that choice. Right? And so when you think about the context of Nowait, right, like you guys were really giving people hours and hours of their time back for your power users.
Yeah, I mean, I think for anybody who hasn't experienced that, who am I to think like everybody in the room? So Nowait,
let's do it. So how many of you have used Nowait? Okay, you got some recruiting to do, man. Let's go. Let's see how you can do.
All right. So the quick story on what we are and were, and I think that'll help us put some meat on the bones of this ethereal intro we've had, is that we started in 2010. Our goal was to give people their time back. That's what we wanted to do. It started with our founders who had spun out of Carnegie Mellon University, and a couple of them had this concept of, while trying to figure out what the wait times are on a Saturday morning for brunch or a Friday night for dinner is excruciating. And even if you're in a populated area with lots of restaurants, you walk to one restaurant, it'll be 20 minutes. Well, let's go to the next one. Oh, that's 30 minutes. Let's go one more. And you end up going back to the first one. If you were just waited, you actually be at your table by then. Terrible experience. So our goal was to find a way to take that data, democratize it, and put it into the hands of everybody, so that you could look at your phone and know what restaurants were around you, what the wait times were in that moment, and put your name on the wait list on your way there. So by the time, even if Chili's has a 20-minute wait, you could put your name on the wait list through your phone, and by the time you get to the restaurant, they were ready for you. And so it created a better guest experience. It allowed restaurants to service more of their clients. Chili's is one of our clients, and I remember in our first meeting with them, one of their chief officers had said, if we could just let everybody eat at Chili's that wants to eat at Chili's, then we wouldn't have any financial concerns. Because their peak hours, they were actually turning people away from their doors because they were too busy. So we were able to allow that company to accomplish their goals. My story of how I got into Nowait, and I think there's a certain point, I guess, where our bios kind of go over each other there. I had come out of Grove City in 2010. I had started a small point of sale company. That's the cash register system at restaurants, and we actually started to work with one of our first clients was Compadres down the road, because it was for non-English speaking restaurants, really. They had so many staff members that couldn't use, at the time, was very Windows 95 looking computer system. And so it was basically like taco, burrito, beans, no beans, beans. And so it was a simple interface where no training was required. It was picture based. We were having a lot of fun, minimal clients. That's the way early startups go. And as I was in the restaurant space working, I was also working night shifts at the post office. So my schedule was 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. I was moving packages around the post office. I'd sleep for a couple hours. I would go and visit my restaurants from around about 11:30 to 2 or 3, and then I would just maybe sleep or do whatever and go back to the post office. That was when student loans kicked in and life got real. And I wanted to do crazy Grove City things like get married to my Grove City sweetheart. And so you needed to make actual money, but I wasn't ready to give up on that dream. And that was basically January 2011. So I was 8-9 months out of school. And then Sean gave me a call. And so that was when you started to develop with Team Nowait. So
Yeah, so I had known the Nowait guys for a while at that point, but it was really just a couple guys thinking about an idea. And so, they had just joined an accelerator in Pittsburgh called Alpha Lab. I believe they just started when you connected in, right? Because
That's right. Well, they started summer 2010, and so when I fully jumped in was basically January 2011.
Okay, so they were alumni and residents
They just
at that
finished,
point.
yep.
Okay. Yeah, so at that point, I was running my third startup and was just an advisor to the founding team. So I had done a couple startups before that, was advising Nowait as well as a couple other startups in town, had gone back to start teaching at Carnegie Mellon at that point, and was feeling sort of relatively unemployable, not in the sense that like I couldn't get a job, but in the sense that like I couldn't imagine getting a real job at that point. And so for those of you who are thinking about this as a career path, just be aware what you're signing up for. It's an awesome path, but it is a different path. It turns out there is one other thing that you can do though, which is that you can convince other people to become unemployable, and so that worked out pretty well. So I was just in the middle of transitioning from being an advisor and working with these startups to being an investor in startups through Birchmere. And I don't remember where in that sequence you came in, but at some point through that process, my relationship with the company shifted from advisor to investor and board member. But as it relates to Evan, as I knew what he was doing, I knew his uncle, actually, that was the connection. I said, look, man, like this company is super high potential. I believe I said something like, your attitude's going to need to be kind of no job too big, no job too small. And Evan lived up to both sides of that, right? I mean, deploying the Chili's account, which was a 7-figure account for us, to I think the first week there, helping them figure out their taxes, their corporate taxes, as I recall.
It came up, this is a little bit of a fast forward, but this is just, for those of you who want to jump into startup life, you get to do everything. And I say it that way on purpose. You have to have that attitude. Day 2, I wrote the employee handbook. I had no HR credentials whatsoever. If you look at it today, there are still Seinfeld references littered throughout. And I also gave us every bank holiday. We're the only startup that would get Columbus Day off. And I actually recently had a little bit of a discussion with my CEO about Columbus Day. And he said, we don't get it off. And I said, yes, we do. He said to me, you should learn the handbook. And I said, I wrote the handbook. It's true, and that existed.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of get into each of those unusual things.
So you came over and joined Nowait, and it was transformational for the company, for sure.
It was, and so when I jumped in, we had 4 founders. I got to be employee number 1 beyond those 4 founders. One of them was a self-declared awesome salesman. I love him. He was in Philadelphia at that point for 3 months, selling. 0 customers. So it was interesting. I thought, well, maybe Philadelphia is just tough. And it is. Philadelphia is a tough city. So I got to come in and basically go door to door to restaurants. And what was really neat is you look for sort of a tangential point. You look for, yes, your product is great, your service is great, but what else is happening in the industry? Well, in 2010, the iPad came out. And so the way Nowait looked at to a restaurant's perspective is they would use an iPad as their replacement paper wait list. And so when I walked in and said, hey, have you guys ever thought of using an iPad at your host stand? There was a series of early adopters that said, I've never seen an iPad in my life. Let me see that. And I'd hand it to them and they'd say, you mean if I pay you $100 a month, my host can use an iPad? Like, yes. And we found out that actually the form, that iPad, was a selling point. So, that was a really interesting thing we started to play off of. And we grew. We grew in our first month 2 or 3 clients. Eventually, by the time we got to our Series A funding with about $2 million, which was led by Birchmere, that was in later 2012. We were up to about 250 clients at that point. I was leading a small sales team of about 2 or 3 people, but had a direct relationship with each of those 250. And I will never forget, I don't know if I've told you this before, I will never forget the moment that $2 million came in, I had, because I was on the sales side, I had been basically working for a commission. Now, let's put that into perspective. Sometimes commission sounds like a great thing. We were selling $100 a month subscriptions. So no matter what percent you take of that, that's not a lot of money as commission. And so I was in it. I was working basically for free for a little while. We were in Las Vegas pitching Caesar's Palace on a really huge project. And I was with my CEO, and Sean sent my CEO a text message, and it said, check the bank account. And we're sitting there, and my CEO opens up the iPad, and looks at the bank account. It said $17,000. And I was like, are you serious? And he's like, yeah, well, it would have worked out. And I'm like, I said, well, let me see. He refreshes it, and it goes to 1.9 million. And I said, refresh it again. It didn't work that time. But it was a big moment for us, and we ended up going to the swimming pool at Caesar's Palace, so my CEO just sort of sat in the water for 4 hours, and that was a little awkward for me. But it was a great.
You did not tell me that.
That was a weird moment. Because what else do you talk about after a while? Just me and a guy hanging out in the pool. But it was a huge moment because we felt like we hadn't it wasn't that we made it, but that we had a legitimate idea where we now had the firepower to go do something awesome. And from my perspective, that was where Sean really was able to, we had our official board at that point, and you, amongst a couple other leaders, a couple other investors, were able to have some direct monthly influence into what we were doing. And that was fantastic as a team at that point of 10 to 15 people. To see that senior leadership have a passion, that was a key thing for us. So that money came in then, and it was a new phase for us. I remember sitting with Sean at a coffee shop, and I said, so what's going to come next? And he actually outlined the next 18 months to a T. He said, well, the first 6 months you're going to feel this, which was basically it's going to feel like nothing's changed. Like it's the same old for the next 3 to 6 months. And then the next 6 months is going to be the busiest 6 months of your life. So, you were spot on with that advice.
Yeah, I think some of that was, so each startup has different sort of gestation periods, kind of post-financing. Part of it is that in that case, we were also transitioning that CEO founder to a chief product officer role and searching for a CEO, which is part of the reason you didn't know it at the time, but I was so confident that the first couple months were not going to be that crazy for you. But I think from my perspective, right, the hard work was always done by you and your team, right? Like the hard job, so that you guys know, between these two roles is being the entrepreneur. And I can say that very confidently, having worn both hats. But the thing you try to do as a good board member is a couple of things. One, have empathy, because what they're doing is really challenging. And I think it's really, really hard to do that if you haven't been an entrepreneur. So people always ask me, what's a good path to becoming an early stage VC? And I tell them, go found a couple of companies and then decide if that's how you want to do for sort of chapter 2 of your sub. The other thing is that hopefully provide some perspective, because it's very easy to lose the forest through the trees when you're going through the day-to-day battles there. But you guys did a lot of the heavy lifting there, and really did an amazing job scaling up that organization.
It was, maybe to kind of tell the Nowait story, then just continue to pepper in some of the context. 2012, we got that Series A, and in January 1st, 2013, we brought in a new CEO. Through that you were a major leader on finding that. And our existing founder, our original founder was our CEO, transitioned into a product officer role, so he could still have impact there. So you would think that maybe you've got a team of 15 to 20 people and everyone's aligned to a vision and things are awesome, and they were. But we immediately had dynamics to work through. You take someone whose baby, right? They just raised this child, and then they have to hand it off to somebody else. And they're both strong-willed people. And there was, for me, I kind of reported to both of them. And so I was sort of split between two houses there, and it was really interesting to go through that. Sean was dead on. We talked about the months ensuing after that CEO came in. We did a couple key initiatives. One of those is, okay, once you have that product that you want to create the world how it ought, what are some splash events? Sean's referred to them as double trigger events that can be launching points. Examples of that, not Nowait, is Airbnb, when they launched, at least when they made a big splash of a launch, which was at the Democratic National Convention in Dallas. Was that what it was? Denver, sorry. And it was a huge launching ground for them. Nowait, we chose the Masters golf tournament.
Just to pause for a minute, I want you to tell this story, but just to pause for a minute, because I think launch is a loaded word, and in a room like this can be sort of misunderstood.
Yeah, that's right.
So just don't lose the context here. So the company had been going for a couple years when Evan's going to tell you the story that he did. In the case of Airbnb, it had been going for a long time. So one of the big fallacies, I think, of entrepreneurship is, if I can just create a big enough launch event, then everybody will realize how great my vision is and the world will catch up. That's almost never the case. More what you see is exactly what Evan's going to describe, which is a couple years of really hard work, or at least a year of really hard work, figuring out what people want, and then using one of these catalyzing events to sort of accelerate growth. And I think the Nowait catalyzing event is an amazing example of this.
I mean, for most people, I got sent to live in Augusta, Georgia for 8 weeks.
You loved it.
That was great.
You do not look. A lot of what you did is really hard. You playing golf and hanging out at Augusta with as much of a golf fan as you was not that hard. And you got to outsource the wedding planning.
I was getting married in a couple months, and I said, babe, I have to move to Augusta for 2 months. I'm sorry. That's what I got to do. I'm an entrepreneur. So the wedding planning ensued without me, which was terrible.
Yeah, outsourced. You missed all those conversations about whatever you talk about when you plan a wedding. I was selling my business the first time when I got married, so I have no context either. But people tell me there's a lot involved in it. Yeah. So anyway, so you're in Augusta playing golf.
And Augusta National Masters Golf Tournament was like a dream come true for me to be around that. If you haven't been to the town of Augusta, it is busy for 7 days a year. That's it. It goes from a town of about 30,000 people to 250,000 people for a week. There is a Hooters there. And my wife knows this, I
was wondering if you're allowed to say that at Grove City. I was kind of waiting for
I spent time at restaurants when I was there. That's it. Any restaurants, I was there. And so basically what we did is we went door to door, and we went to each restaurant in the city and said, look, you're going to be busy, but you're only really busy 1 week. Can we give you Nowait for a week? No cost, but we want to take over the city with Nowait. And we actually put a philanthropic approach behind it. For every restaurant that jumps in, our team, we actually had said our investor network is going to put in a set amount of money into this, what was happening at the time, an Augusta Warrior Fund for wounded warriors. And so we had this philanthropic approach. We were able to get over 50 restaurants to use our service. And basically, as a guest, every restaurant you went to, you were walking into a restaurant that was using Nowait. And we took over this town. There was a lot of press, local press. But the other thing about the Masters is it's a really elitist event. And so the CEOs of Chili's and Buffalo Wild Wings and Texas Roadhouse, they were all there. And they all went to their local Augusta restaurant.
They were checking on the restaurants. The golf tournament was
yes,
secondary,
they came,
right?
Yeah, as far as taxes are concerned, they were there to check on their restaurants. Yeah. And so it was really interesting that we bumped into the CEO of Chili's about 2 months later, and he said, I saw you boys at my Chili's Augusta location. Tell me about how that went. And so we built some relationships from there. It was a fantastic time. We got to spend, I had to spend some time at the Masters. It was terrible. And we used that event to launch in the context that Sean explained on a national scale. And fast forward a couple months, we're in a room with the C-suite of Chili's, which at the time was the second largest restaurant group that we could talk to. And we went through a sales pitch process with them. Fast forward a little bit from there, we launched into every location in a matter of 11 weeks. And their president had said it was the smoothest, most appreciated technology implementation that the group had ever gone through. And so as we're going through that, our team is scaling. Personally, I went from the stage of selling local businesses to doing what we called customer success on local businesses, making sure they stayed with us, to selling larger groups, then to managing larger groups, to selling the biggest groups like Chili's and managing them. And all of a sudden, I'm 25, 26 years old at the time, and I am delivering reports to the Chili's C-suite team, these guys who are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, of how our software is driving value for them. And I have to put on my corporate hat. Someone said that to me. So, well, you got to put on your corporate hat. I said, I don't have a corporate hat. I'm 26. I've only done startups. So I had to read some books about how to put on a corporate hat. And like, as you'd expect, the books were like this big, full of red tape. And so we had those experiences, and the Nowait story on that was we took those moments. We weren't too concerned in 2013 with building the most perfect systems across the board. We allowed our clients to kind of push us through those mechanisms. So when Chili's began to ask us questions, like, well, what do you guys do for change management? I had no idea what they were talking about. So I'm like, well, we're very thoughtful about that. And then
you thought a lot about it.
I thought a lot about it. And so you develop processes, internal systems, security systems to accommodate what the market base is asking for. And that really helped us mature as a young company.
Yeah, which I think I think that iterative approach to maturing a product is certainly a wise one. Let's come back to you as an entrepreneur who made this choice, because I think it's a helpful context for why doing a startup or starting a startup is an interesting sort of career path for people coming out of school. So you talked about each of those different roles that you did at Nowait. Like, if you were going to do those differently, like, think about Yelp, right? So now you have the context of the acquiring company that you're in. Like,
yep.
How hard would it be to get all the experience that you got at Nowait inside of an environment like Yelp?
Yeah, it's impossible, right? One of the biggest advantages, and when we get to wrap up, this is like, I think the point we really felt was Grove City College students in particular are wired for. I mean, you're all different. I'm sorry, everybody's special, but there's something about the various students I've met over. I mean, I can say like multiple like cycles of students now. I've been that far out, where there's this common component of students that are genuine, trustworthy, hard workers, smart. These things that startups need. I could never have learned or had the right to manage a multi-million-dollar client at any corporation. I shouldn't have been
a few years out of school.
Right. And so the experience you learn of being boots on the ground and how hard that is. And you have all the pains of, you get that as maybe a small business owner in a different scale. You get those pains, but you also get to be in the room of strategy. No reason for a 23-year-old kid to be in a strategic room of how you're going to invest $2 million into your business over the next couple years. Philosophical decisions like how fast, that was the first time I had encountered the problem, and I'm sure it's talked about now, which is spending money too fast is a big problem. Spending money too slow is possibly a bigger problem, right? We were Pittsburgh people who were used to bootstrapping. We didn't know how to spend money yet. Those lessons you don't get to learn in a corporate setting. I want to go back to the first point. I was working night shifts in a post office, and in my first year at Nowait, I'll spare you the numbers, but I don't think I technically had to pay taxes. Like in my first year, it was.
I think you make more than in a month now, probably.
Yes,
for sure.
That's true.
Yeah.
And yeah, I make more per month at this point in my career than I did in my first actual year at Nowait, and it was tough. My network came around me and helped me out, right? And it was hard to not go into debt, but it was a moment that where I look at especially the next phase of the types of roles I hope to develop and the things I want to accomplish. Essential, actually, to have that experience from the startup.
I mean, the other way you do it, right, is you pay $100,000 to go get an MBA, right? So, right, and that's instead of somebody who teaches partially in an MBA program and partially in other master's programs. But like your choices, right, are you can go do a startup and live on ramen noodles, but don't add another incremental $100,000 of debt. That's how you get that.
Yeah.
That's how you get that exposure. Or you can end up in these organizations that just de facto have a vacuum of talent relative to the things that need to get done. And so, you know, as you have been able to hear tonight, like Evan is very thoughtful, very strategic, but also part of the thing that you can't overlook is like there just weren't enough people to get done everything that needed to get done. And so the basic strategy from a board perspective was, well, somebody's got to figure out how to launch Augusta. We'll give it to Evan. He'll figure it out. Well, somebody's going to need to figure out how to deploy Chili's in 9 weeks. We'll give it to Evan. He'll figure it out, right? And so, you know, did Evan have the same experience as, like, if we had been able to go hire someone with, you know, lots of PR and event launching experience? Clearly not, but, you know, through hard work and being thoughtful, you were able to figure it out. And now you have this just breadth of experience that typically you'd have to invest in a lot of 2 years of your life plus a lot of student debt to encounter some other way.
Yeah, I was just talking with a student earlier today about events and how events in themselves can be entrepreneurial. And you think, well, am I an entrepreneur? You know, if you're someone who's helped organize something like homecoming or maybe a group that you're starting on campus, yes. The marketing, the having to convince Student Life and Learning to give you that stamp, like convincing people to come to your event, like that is entrepreneurial. For me, I was actually on a golf course getting a call from a VP of basically the decision maker on our Chili's deal. He said, great news, looks like we're going to go through with this, but there's big concern. Can you roll out your iPads into 1,000 Chili's locations? And I said, well, yeah, over the course of a year, we have the plan. He said, well, we were talking about 10 weeks. And I said, oh yeah, well, let me take a look here. I'm on a golf course, and I made up a plan on the spot. We talked through it, and basically over the course of 10 to 12 weeks, we were in 40 cities where we did these launch events. We rented out spaces and we did big parties and music and got all the Chili's in the area to come to these big startup celebration events and trained them on how to use the software and let it go from there. It probably was a crazy, too expensive idea, but I didn't know what else to do, and it was a blast. And so you get this kind of, you know, I was too inexperienced to know any better, and we had a really good time.
Well, but you didn't, like, the experienced guy would have said no.
Yeah, probably smart of him, yeah.
Well, probably not, because you probably would have lost the $1 million account.
Yeah. Client, yeah.
So I think actually you did the smart thing, right? But there is a certain amount of irrational exuberance that's helpful in these entrepreneurial endeavors, right? So
when we moved on from there, that was a big thing for us. On a personal basis, I got to continue to manage and sell it to our biggest clients. Actually, the corporate piece worked for us because we found out how to speak corporate better, how to talk to...
Those books worked.
They worked, right? We learned how to read earnings reports and how CEOs think, and we started to present that way. We started to land more national clients. And fast forward all the way to the big moment, which was my birthday, March 1st, 2017.
That's what we were going for.
Thank you. I planned that. And we sell for $40 million to Yelp. And that was a huge moment for us. We had been working very hard to that point. Before anybody else asked the question, Sean took all the money. He's the one who made it all. $48 million he took somehow out of it. And I was teasing him about that earlier. And so we got all the way to that point, and what Yelp cited was this team and kind of momentum that had built where we had 5 million people using our guest-facing app. We had about 5,000 restaurants that were on our service. And there was a momentum building that, I'll speak into, I was only an aspect of that acquisition, but basically Yelp had said, hey, Yelp hadn't figured out how to work with national clients or how to build a client management facing organization to the level that the Nowait team had. And that's part of us being there today, is building that with them and showing them some of that process. And so they said, well, how did you kids learn that? And we said, well, we basically just lived in restaurants. When we started, this is 2011, the way we sold to restaurants, I would go door to door and I would say, listen, I'll just stay at your restaurant all weekend. If anything goes wrong, I'll be here. And I would do my work, and then I'd go to a restaurant from 4:30 to 9 p.m. And I would just hang out, kind of creepy. But, people thought I worked there. I wore a polo shirt and things were good. And And so we talked about how, well, you had the experience too, even as an investor.
Yeah.
Every single person who worked at Nowait, even an investor, had to go work a shift or a couple shifts at a restaurant.
I think everybody but investors had to work a couple.
Yeah, that's true. You did get a break.
Like after I did one, the guy was like, "I think one's enough. I feel like you've gotten the experience you needed out of this."
And that type of empathy, I think, became pervasive in our culture at the company. And so to this theme of creating things how it ought to be, tech sales, business-to-business sales, there's a lot of machines out there, meaning you can find any sales leader who's got a killer process of how to make the right amount of calls and how to hit your numbers. There's some great sales processes out there. But from my perspective, when we really got into it, it was this industry needs some empathy. This industry, these restaurateurs, 27 phone calls a day from salespeople is the average amount of phone calls a small business restaurant gets. So we were one of 27 calls a day that they are receiving. So how can we interject passion into what was happening? Not just that we were passionate salespeople, but that we could really be like them and understand what it's like. So we'd go and work with restaurants. We'd say, hey, I know I'm one of 27 people talking to you today. I think this actually can help your business. Can I explain this? And then I will put in all of my personal work, whatever needs to happen to sell this with you. And we started to see, and even at Yelp, we're seeing that contagious effect of how to sell. We had a rule that you couldn't actually get mad. Even if someone hung up on you, they're running their business. There's nothing to be mad at, right? So we started to change the way as salespeople and as customer service, customer success people, we thought about it. I want to make sure we have time for Q&A.
Let's go to
yeah,
Q&A.
let's do that.
Some questions anybody would like to ask?
Yvonne's really adamant.
We have a young lady ready to ask a question.
Thank you. Just fantastic, guys. Thanks again. I would like you to take maybe just a couple of minutes and talk about how you integrate your faith with your work, because that's something we've really been talking about and digging into here.
So to me, like the best way that you can integrate your faith into your work is to do your work with such excellence that people can't help but be impressed with that, independent of ever needing to let them know that there's a faith component behind it, right? So to me, entrepreneurial activities and this act of applying creativity to the work that we do and kind of entrepreneurial thinking is inherently a truth that whether you know why or not, everybody wants to do. And the reason that we want to do that is that we were created in the image of God, and God is a very creative person. But I think where sometimes we get tripped up as believers is that we then think the easy way to solve for this is like to put a fish on the back of our service truck or whatever, or make sure that the iPads have fish on them or something.
Yeah.
And like that doesn't tend to work out that well. On the other hand, like doing your job with amazing excellence so that people are like, wow, you're really killing it is fantastic. Like one of my favorite things that happens to me is I'll know people for a long time, we'll be interacting, and then it'll be like a year into our professional relationship, and I'll mention that like my wife and I were going to church this weekend or something, and they'll have this like stop moment like, man, you are really smart to be a Christian. And they don't mean it insulting. They just mean it like, man, I've met a lot of Christians who are awfully dumb. And so my reaction to them usually is like, oh, I've met a lot of atheists who are awfully dumb too. Like I would prefer not to be compared to the lowest common denominator of my group, and maybe I won't do that to you, right? But like to me, like the excellence is actually how you win on these things.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add to that is, asking yourself questions like, what do you wish the world did better? What passion inside of you do you have that you wish people did this process better? Or maybe just generally, like, I wish everybody was a Christian, right? Like some people might say that from a spiritual perspective. That's great. And there are a lot of ways to accomplish that. If you want to do that through policy, go into politics, run for office. If you want to do that in your family, then make sure you are investing a ton of time in your family. I personally believe that product and experience, actual, call it apps is like the thing we're on today, but product and experience helps create behaviors. So I think of things like, okay, Facebook, Instagram, TBH, there is a great user experience that drives us all to that, and it's creating habits for us. So when I think about being impactful with my faith, it's what type of product am I creating for the marketplace that's affecting human behavior? And then creating that the right way is how we create the world how it ought to be.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
No nudge, I'm bringing it to you.
I was going to ask Evan, how much networking has helped you sell? Do you have to connect with people like personally?
Yeah, I would say how much networking. It's cliche, but it's all about relationships. It's not always the local mixers, right? It's not that you go there and you get all the business cards. It's not necessarily that networking. Never underestimate it. But selling, relationships, this weird Augusta story of how we met this one manager at Chili's who let us actually be in his restaurant, and then it climbed all the way to the CEO. The relationships you build, you never know how they're going to kind of boil down or come out. And so networking, to me, is one of the most important things that you can do.
All right, I'll come over, guys.
The workout.
Fun here.
Hi, thank you guys so much for coming tonight. Can you elaborate more on how you guys came to value your company at $40 million, and what did the negotiation process look like with Yelp?
So some of this I can talk about, but some of this I can't. So the reality for any transaction is that typically to get the best price you can for sub $100 million transactions, it's a lot of how many different buyers and options can you get to the table, right? And so we had alternatives in the case of Nowait. More alternatives would have certainly helped drive an even higher price for it. But you're not valuing a business at the size and scale of Nowait based on the kinds of things you learn in your finance class. You're valuing it based on sort of what the market will bear, right? And so the more options you have, the higher a price that you can drive. Certainly, as an entity inside of Yelp, or previous to that as us as investors, we're hoping at some point, if Nowait had continued to be an independent business and gone on to have more zeros on that valuation, at some point there are more tangible metrics that you can use to value the business. But a lot of it is vision, users, things like that, and those are squishy enough variables that you're really trying to create a marketplace and multiple bidders. And we had options that helped. More options would have probably helped it go even higher.
JJ.
Thank you guys for coming out. I was just going to ask about the logo, like the message behind it, what it's supposed to be, I guess. Because I don't...
You don't get it?
No.
Oh, hard.
Spent a lot of money on that logo.
Did actually. That was a very
Seriously.
strategic
It was
logo.
not a cheap logo.
We had another one. Maybe you might like that more. So it's a great question. There is thought behind it. Logos usually try to mean something. I don't know if everybody can see this here. So we had 1 million logos we were trying to do. This was actually more recent. It was about 2016. We launched this particular logo. And we're trying to figure out how to make our business less about replacing pager systems, because we would text guests when their table ready, and make it more about the guest experience. And literally the way it came about is our external design team was sitting with our leadership, and someone said the phrase, let's find a way to look for the guests in Nowait. And so this I with the font is... this guest is the I from the font that we had chosen previously for Nowait. So someone said, oh, look, there is a guest in Nowait. And it was the I from the word Nowait. And so we just used a gradient to kind of show someone moving through the line is what that's supposed to represent. There's a little people kind of gradually progressing. But it's the same I that you'll find in the word no wait, which isn't up here. But that was kind of how we extracted that so that we'd be all about the guest. But sorry.
Yeah. All right, Mona. Let's pass it down.
There you go. Save those calories.
Thank you guys for coming. I just wanted to kind of like 2 questions ago ask how I guess at the beginning of Nowait, did you guys already have the vision to basically like when you joined and was it already on the track to going to raise those Series A rounds for venture capital and then go on to be acquired? Was that kind of the end goal from the time that you had started? I guess how do those discussions in general go for the startups?
So the reality is that like once you take other people's money, right, which Nowait did actually even before I got involved. So there was a small $400,000 seed round, and I guess I should say like it's important to remember like vocabulary shifted. We probably today, like if those rounds were done today, we would have called that $400,000 round a pre-seed round, and we would have called what I did a seed round, and then the $10 million round that came after us, the Series A. But either way, like as soon as you start raising money from other people, what you need to remember is you're committing to get them, if successful, a lot more money back than they're putting in. Because the statistics on investing in startups are that most of them go to zero. And so the only way that people like me get to keep investing in startups is that the ones who do well return a lot more than the capital that was put to work. So as soon as the founders raised that $400,000 round, the plan was at some point to get liquidity for those investors. The paths to do that are either sell to a large company, and Yelp and Google, from like the investment memo that I wrote when we did the investment, said the 3 most likely acquirers for Nowait, if we ultimately sell this, were OpenTable, Yelp, and Google. And by the way, the 3 most likely acquirers for Nowait when we sold Nowait were those same 3 companies. Or ultimately that this could have been a standalone public company, but those are very, very rare events. And even in that case, the investors sell. So, yes.
Hi. I just wanted to ask both of you guys, so a startup is something that definitely has a lot of failure and things that you have to bounce back up from. So in the beginning stages, especially the early times of Nowait, how did you find yourselves able to really push through and really get back up every day until you got to the point where you were at the $2 million point?
I think I didn't know any better. It would be really hard to have some of those valleys again. I said to Sean a couple years later from our Series A, I said, I was really worried at a certain point. And I said, wow, I just feel like this is the first time Nowait is about to potentially fall off a cliff. And he said, that's more a testament to your success as an entrepreneur, Evan, because you were way closer to a cliff like 6 times. You just didn't know it.
Right. I mean, I can't believe he did it, but he did disclose what the bank account was when we wired money. So
it was rough.
That'll give you a sense.
And so I think, how do you bounce back? I knew that working at Nowait wasn't going to be the big salary, and so it was just, did anything change about our vision? Are we still doing this? Are the people around me quitting? And they weren't. And even when we had to not do layoffs but change our personal financial outlooks to make it work, our vision was still there. And nobody quit. Everybody was in on it, and our vision was still the same. I think if our CEO came and said, hey, we're going to try to do a quick sale and get out of this for about $800,000, and it would have been hard, I think, to work really aggressive to that point. But it was the same thing of we're going to give people their time back. And until my fiance would have ripped me out of there, I think I would have kept doing it.
Hi. You talked about how in the beginning, in the startup phase, you did kind of a little bit of everything, and you got a lot of different experience there. How has the company changed, and how has your role within the company changed since you sold?
Yeah. So generalists is what you need in the early days, right? You need people who are capable of doing a lot of things. You can criticize some of the entrepreneurship program, that was my major, entrepreneurship program, because you don't walk away with a specific graphic design skill or a specific certification. But in hindsight, that generalist that I was actually exactly what the company, someone who could write the handbook and sell a customer and set up your billing system on the same day. And so you did everything like that. It was basically anything customer facing. You just had to sit and troubleshoot your way through it. And as you grow, you become more specialized. What happens is a lot of people don't make that transition well. You might be a generalist who loves doing a little bit of everything, and as you're asked to do a very specific thing, there are people in our company over the years who were great leaders at the beginning who fell off. My role today is I get to manage and lead a small team of people who are managing the multi-million-dollar accounts. It's a very specific job with a weird, boring set of skills, very corporate set of skills. And so I get to do that today. Over different eras or different phases of a business, you're required to do different things. I think that overall is why, as I've had the chance to speak in some classes over the last couple of years, I think Grove City Grove City adults, I'm sorry, Grove City leaders of the day, that you're positioned very well to be impactful into startups now. As a matter of fact, I've hired a bunch of Grove City people over the years, all of them fantastic, actually. Some of our top salespeople our two top salespeople were Grove City because they were very aggressive. They wanted to be successful, but they're actually trustworthy. People actually believe them. And sometimes in a startup, you're selling yourself more than you're selling your product. And then, not to say you have to go into sales, right? But even on the customer success side, I hired some Grove City people because on my hiring spec, one of the rules was, would my mom love this person? And it was like, did this person kind of make me frustrated because they were just so nice, and they would, but they really knew how to be successful. Grove City, you are positioned well to jump into an early stage organization and provide that energy. Learn alongside a CEO. Maybe not make $1 million on this first company, right? But be in a space where you get to learn in your first 3 or 4 years, where you can actually afford to live on just enough money to get by. So that kind of segued that into my overall point, but good question.
One more question? All right.
So it seems that everyone today has this great idea for an app that does something completely random. It's actually useless. What do you look for, I guess, as a capital investor? And no, I don't have an app that I'm trying to sell you. What do you look for that separates the wheat from the chaff? Is there a particular, is it the people? Is it how they approach a problem? Can you see, oh, you have a really garbage idea, but you're a great person, and I think we can turn that into something?
Yeah, so I think I know where you're going. So the reality is that the math is such that it's not like, oh, if you check one of the 5 boxes, you get invested. Because the reality is that we spend time, not like email, but sit down face-to-face or spend multiple Google Hangout video calls with about 150 to 200 startups for every investment that we make. And so it's not like, well, if you clear the bar on 3 of the 5 things, but you clear it really well, we'll ignore the other 2. At a high level, what you're looking for is just a couple of things. You're looking for, if this business is successful, is it going to be really successful? Is there the possibility for this to be a breakout success? We sold Nowait early, but I think Nowait could have been a breakout success, a return the fund success. Have the founders and early employees spent the money in such a way that it's like, oh, with the little bit of capital that they've had to date, they've made a good amount of progress. With more resources, I believe they can make a lot more progress. Right? In their case, they had spent $400,000. Actually, they spent $380,000, as we now learn tonight. And they had made a lot of progress on that. And so it's like, oh, I bet on $2 million they can make, an order of magnitude more progress, which they did. The next question is, if they're really successful, will it be hard for others to come in and do what they've done? So the reality is that Nowait was a business where lots and lots of people tried to create a Nowait-like app over a weekend. Like some of you have done the startup weekend experiences. It's like every other startup weekend, somebody built Nowait for the first couple of years after we invested, because it turns out it's not that hard to build like a really crappy first version of Nowait. It's hard to do it really well, but to build the first version is not that hard, and so it slots nicely into like a 56-hour pizza box experience. But what we believed is like at scale, there would be really, really strong network effects, which by the way turned out to be true. So each restaurant that we added a bunch more customer, and each customer who used the app would add more restaurants. And each time we did that, it got harder and harder for one of those pizza box projects to dislodge us. And then are these people that you want to work with every day, right? And I, in this case, it was unique. I had known the founders and known the early employees for a long time. Usually that's more of a judgment call over a couple months of getting to know them. And then for me, that last question is, okay, does this company make the world as it should be, right? And so for the case of Nowait, they checked all 5 of those boxes. It was a very easy decision then to say, okay, we're interested in working with you. Let's see if we can come to terms on an investment that makes sense. But if any of those 5 had been not positive, we just would have moved to the next investment.
Any final words of wisdom or encouragement for Grove City students? Any last thought you'd like to leave us with tonight?
I mean, I'll just say, like, my experience coming out of school was a little different than Evan's, but once I left Carnegie Mellon, it was very, very similar to Evan's. I am a big believer in entrepreneurial thinking, which is a longer conversation, being just a great thing for people to do right out of the gate, both because I think it does fulfill some professional callings for people, as we talked about, but also it gives you experience that you just can't buy. I mean, you can kind of buy it by accumulating a lot more student debt. But even, truthfully, like in a classroom, in an MBA setting, it's not the same thing as working on a real business with a real problem. And so it was, the first 13 years of my career from CMU to Birchmere was a similar transformation of sort of no job too big, no job too small. Evan's done the same thing. I really would just encourage you, as you're weighing the differences between that blood-sucking job at Deloitte. Am I allowed to say that? Too late. Between that blood-sucking job at Deloitte and doing a startup, like don't underestimate like the value of actually going, even for a little less money, and being part of one of these companies where you can have real impact, you can transform your career, and you can put yourself on just a very different trajectory than what you'll get just slotting right into the machine.
Yeah, and the echo on that, my own spin, is that you have a lot of people cheering for you. There are people out there who are not necessarily Grove City alumni, but people with great ideas, and they have funding, and they're looking for people to come alongside them and become trustees. Someone who is not a founder, but thinks like a founder. Someone who's willing to fight tooth and nail, low salary, whatever it takes to make a vision come true. And to me, there was no other way to live my early 20s. There was no reason to give it to blood-sucking.
Yeah, you can soften it if you want, sure. But please don't be a consultant or that's I think basically what we're trying to say here.
And so I would just say that if you're thinking, well, this sounds all interesting, but I don't know if I can do it. I mean, on a very practical level, Sean is actually a very approachable guy, and he'd be happy to sometimes. Yeah, and I'd love to talk with you about different projects that are happening, and there are a lot of people cheering for you to go and create the world how it ought to be. And it's going to take all of what you've learned and then some and continued learning. But you are in as great of a position, as great of a college with the right spiritual background to make that happen. So I think thanks for having us, and we hope that's effective for you guys.
Well, Sean, Evan, we can't thank you enough for your time, your generosity, your inspiration, your wisdom, and your encouragement to all of our students. Can we give them a great round of applause? Thank you all for coming. Have a great night.